You need to understand just because they are silent does not mean they are empty, and just because you cannot see their thoughts does not mean you never cross their mind. I know how it feels, those quiet nights where everything slows down and your thoughts get louder, where you replay moments, conversations, small details that meant everything to you, and then one question rises above all the others: do they even think about me? And that question carries weight because it is not just about them. It is about what you meant. It is about whether what you felt was real. It is about whether you were seen or simply experienced and forgotten. And the silence makes it harder because silence leaves room for imagination. And imagination, when it is mixed with pain, creates the worst kind of stories. You start telling yourself that if they cared, they would reach out. If they missed you, you would know. If you mattered, they wouldn't be able to stay away. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to shrink your own value based on their lack of visible emotion. You begin to measure your worth through their distance. And that is where the misunderstanding begins. Because you need to understand, not everyone processes emotions the way you do. You feel and then you think. They think and then avoid feeling. You lean in when something matters. They lean out when something becomes too real. And this difference creates a painful illusion, an illusion that silence equals indifference, when in reality, silence can often be a form of emotional protection. When you were with them, or even when things started to become deeper, there were moments when you felt the shift, moments when things felt real, moments when connection was no longer light and easy, but meaningful and heavy in a beautiful way. Those are the moments that stay, even if they never say it. Those are the moments that echo later, when there is no pressure to respond, no expectation to show up, no emotional demand placed on them. Because here is what happens that you don't see. When the relationship is active, when emotions are present, when closeness is building, they feel overwhelmed. Not because you are too much, but because closeness requires something from them that they are not used to giving: consistency, vulnerability, emotional presence. And when that pressure builds, their instinct is to create space, to step back, to regain control over their internal world. But when the space is created, when the intensity fades, when you are no longer there asking, feeling, expecting, something shifts. The very thing that overwhelmed them, your presence, your care, your consistency, becomes something they notice in your absence. And that is when thoughts begin to surface, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in moments they don't expect. It might be when they see something that reminds them of you, a place, a song, a phrase you used, a memory that slips in without permission. It might be when they are alone and there is nothing to distract them, no conversation to escape into, no noise to cover the silence. And in that space, your memory appears, not because they are trying to think of you, but because something real leaves an imprint, and imprints do not disappear just because someone avoids them. But here's the part that is difficult to accept. They may feel it and still do nothing. They may think of you and still not reach out. They may miss you in a way they cannot fully understand and still choose distance. And that is where your heart gets confused, because for you, feeling leads to action. Missing leads to reaching out. Caring leads to showing up. But for them, feeling can lead to withdrawal, because feeling means vulnerability, and vulnerability feels unsafe. So instead of moving toward you, they move away from the feeling itself. They distract themselves. They rationalize. They tell themselves stories that make it easier to stay distant. It wouldn't have worked. It's better this way. They're probably fine. Not because these things are true, but because they are easier than facing the discomfort of emotion. And I want you to hear this clearly. Their silence is not always a reflection of your worth. It is often a reflection of their capacity. You could have been kind, patient, understanding, real, and still be someone they think about without being someone they come back to. And that does not erase what you meant. It simply reveals what they are able to handle. Because thinking of someone and being able to love them properly are two very different things. Missing someone and being able to show up for them consistently are not the same. And this is where you have to protect yourself, because knowing they think of you can become a trap if you are not careful. It can keep you waiting. It can keep you hoping. It can make you believe that just because you exist in their mind, you should exist in their life again. But you need to understand, being remembered is not the same as being chosen. Being thought of is not the same as being valued in action. And your heart deserves more than a quiet memory in someone else's mind. It deserves presence, it deserves effort, it deserves consistency. So yes, they think of you in moments they don't talk about, in ways they don't express, in thoughts they quickly push away, but that truth is not meant to pull you back. It is meant to set you free from the lie that you were forgettable. Because you were not forgettable. You were someone who showed up, someone who cared, someone who brought something real into their life. And even if they could not hold it, even if they could not match it, even if they could not stay, that does not erase the impact you made. And now the question is not whether they think of you. The question is whether you are ready to stop searching for yourself in their silence and start finding yourself in your own presence. Because the moment you stop needing their thoughts to validate your worth is the moment you begin to truly heal, and that is where your power has always been waiting. You need to understand, avoidants do not forget you. They delay feeling you, and that delay is what confuses your heart the most. Because you feel everything in the moment, you feel the absence the second it begins, you feel the silence as it grows, you feel the distance like a slow ache that doesn't leave your chest. And when you don't see that same reaction from them, when they seem calm, distant, unaffected, it creates a painful story inside you, a story that says, maybe it didn't mean as much to them, or worse, maybe I didn't mean as much. But that is not the truth. That is just the difference in how emotions are processed. You move toward feelings, they move away from them. You sit with emotions, they postpone them. You try to understand, they try to escape. And in that difference, something very real gets misunderstood, because just because they are not feeling it now does not mean they will not feel it later. In the beginning, when things shift or end, they often experience something you would never expect, a sense of relief. Not relief from you, but relief from the emotional intensity, relief from the pressure of closeness, relief from the expectations that come with something real. And that relief allows them to function, to move on the surface, to appear unaffected, to look like they have already let go. And that image, that version of them, is what hurts you the most, because it feels like you are the only one carrying the weight of what was lost. But what you don't see is what happens after that relief fades, after the space becomes normal, after the distractions stop being enough. Because emotions do not disappear, they wait. They sit quietly beneath the surface until the mind is no longer busy enough to suppress them. And when that moment comes, when there is no urgency, no pressure, no expectation to respond or explain, something begins to rise. They start to feel you in pieces, not all at once, but in fragments. A memory appears, a moment replays, a feeling they ignored starts to make sense. And it does not come with clarity at first, it comes with confusion, with discomfort, with a quiet awareness that something meaningful passed through their life, and they did not fully meet it. But here is the part that is hard to accept. Even when they start feeling it, they may not act on it. Because feeling something and knowing what to do with it are two different things. And for someone who has spent a lifetime avoiding emotional depth, that feeling does not immediately turn into action. It often turns into more avoidance. They might distract themselves, keep busy, jump into routines, talk to new people, anything that keeps them from sitting too long with what they are starting to feel. Because feeling you now means confronting what they could not give you then. It means recognizing the gap between what you offered and what they were capable of returning. And that realization can be uncomfortable, even painful, because it touches on something deeper than just the relationship. It touches on their patterns, their fears, their limitations. So instead of moving toward you, they move away from the feeling again. They tell themselves stories that make it easier to stay distant. They minimize the connection. They rationalize the ending. They convince themselves it was not as deep, not as important, not as lasting, not because it wasn't, but because accepting that it was would require them to sit with emotions they don't know how to hold. And while all of this is happening quietly inside them, you are left in the present moment, feeling everything, questioning everything, trying to make sense of something that does not follow the logic of your heart. You wonder how someone can share something real with you and then seem so unaffected by its absence. You wonder how they can move forward while you are still processing what happened. You wonder if you imagined the connection, if you created meaning where there was none. But you need to understand delayed emotion does not mean absent emotion. It just means it comes when it is safe for them, not when it is needed for you. And that difference can feel unfair because it is. You are doing the emotional work now, and they may only begin to touch it later when you have already started healing, when you have already started rebuilding yourself, when you are no longer in the same place you were when you needed them. And this is where your strength is tested, because knowing they may feel it later can keep you emotionally tied to them now. It can create a quiet hope that one day they will realize, one day they will come back, one day they will understand what they lost. And that hope can become a trap if you are not careful, because it keeps your life paused for a possibility that may never turn into reality. Because even if they feel it, even if they think of you, even if they miss you in ways they cannot explain, it does not guarantee change. It does not guarantee action. It does not guarantee that they will suddenly become capable of giving you what you needed all along. And this is where you have to bring the focus back to yourself. Not in a harsh way, not in a cold way, but in an honest way. You have to ask yourself, do I want to be loved by someone who only understands my value when I am gone? Or do I want to be with someone who recognizes it while I am still here? Because you deserve real-time love, not delayed realization. You deserve presence, not reflection. You deserve someone who does not need to lose you to understand you. So yes, they may feel you later, they may think of you in quiet moments, they may carry pieces of you in ways they never express. But your life is not meant to be lived waiting for someone else's emotional timing to catch up with your heart. Your life is meant to move forward, to grow, to heal, to open up to something that meets you where you are, not something that understands you only in hindsight. And the moment you truly accept that, the moment you release the need for their delayed feelings to validate your experience, is the moment you begin to free yourself from a story that was never meant to hold your future. You need to understand you do not need their thoughts to validate your worth, even though a part of your heart still searches for that confirmation in the quiet spaces they left behind. I know how tempting it is to believe that if they are thinking about you, then it means you mattered. Then it means what you felt was real. Then it means you were not just someone who passed through their life unnoticed. And when you don't hear from them, when there is no message, no sign, no visible proof of their feelings, your mind begins to fill in the blanks with doubt. You start questioning yourself in ways you never used to. You wonder if you were too much or not enough, if you gave too early or expected too soon, if you misread everything, if the connection you felt so deeply was only real on your side. And slowly, without realizing it, your worth becomes tied to their response, their silence, their ability or inability to show up for you. But you need to understand something that will change the way you see this entire situation. Your value was never determined by their capacity to recognize it. Your love did not become less real just because they could not meet it. Your presence did not become less meaningful just because they could not stay present with you. Because when you gave your time, your energy, your care, your understanding, you were not performing. You were expressing who you are. You were showing your depth, your ability to connect, your willingness to be open and real with someone. And that is not something small. That is not something common. That is something rare, something that not everyone knows how to hold. And that is where the disconnect happens. Because the truth is, some people experience something genuine and still do not have the emotional tools to handle it. They feel it, but they cannot sustain it. They receive it, but they cannot reciprocate it. They recognize it, but only after it is no longer in front of them. And when you are the one who gave that kind of connection, it is easy to assume that their reaction defines its value, but it doesn't. You need to understand, the way someone treats you is a reflection of their patterns, not a measurement of your worth. Their inconsistency does not mean you were not enough. Their distance does not mean you were not important. Their silence does not mean you were forgettable. It simply means they did not have the capacity to meet you where you were. And I know there is still a part of you that wants to believe that if they are thinking of you, if they miss you, if they feel something, then maybe it changes things. Maybe it means something could still happen. Maybe it means you should hold on just a little longer. But you have to be honest with yourself. Thinking of someone is not the same as choosing them. Missing someone is not the same as showing up for them. Feeling something is not the same as building something. And your heart deserves more than being a thought in someone else's mind. It deserves to be a priority in someone's life. It deserves to be met with consistency, with effort, with clarity, not confusion, not silence, not uncertainty. Because when you depend on their thoughts to validate you, you give away your power. You place your sense of worth in a place you cannot control, in a mind you cannot see, in a person who has already shown you their limitations, and that keeps you stuck, emotionally tied to something that is no longer feeding you, no longer growing you, no longer honoring you. But when you take that power back, when you decide that your worth is something you define, something you live, something you protect, everything begins to shift. You stop chasing validation in silence. You stop looking for meaning in their absence. You stop interpreting their distance as a reflection of your value. And instead, you begin to see yourself clearly. You begin to recognize that you were the one who showed up. You were the one who cared deeply. You were the one who was willing to build something real. And that does not make you weak. It makes you capable. It makes you someone who can love in a way that is honest and full and meaningful. And yes, it hurts when that love is not returned in the same way. It hurts when someone you opened your heart to cannot meet you at that level. But their inability does not erase your ability. It does not take away what you bring into a connection. It does not make you less deserving of something real. You need to understand, closure is not found in knowing whether they think of you. Closure is found in accepting what they showed you. It is found in recognizing the pattern, the inconsistency, the distance, and choosing not to ignore it anymore. It is found in trusting your experience instead of questioning it. Because deep down, you already know the truth. You know how it felt. You know the moments when you gave more than you received. You know the times you had to convince yourself that things were okay when they were not. You know the effort you put in to keep something alive that was slowly fading. And that truth is enough. You do not need additional proof from their thoughts, their feelings, or their eventual realization. You do not need them to come back and tell you that you mattered for it to be real. You do not need them to miss you for your presence to have had value. Because your worth is not something that appears only when someone recognizes it. It exists consistently, independently, without needing permission, without needing validation, without needing confirmation from someone who could not see it fully when they had the chance. And the moment you truly accept that, the moment you stop searching for your value in their silence and start standing in it within yourself, something inside you becomes lighter. You stop carrying the weight of unanswered questions. You stop waiting for a sign that may never come. You stop needing their thoughts to feel complete. And that is where your healing begins. Not in their mind, not in their realization, but in your decision to see yourself clearly, to honor what you gave, and to move forward without needing anyone else to confirm that it was enough.